The Fox propaganda outlet has really struggled defending the indefensible actions, statements, and really just criminality of Donald Trump's administration these first 4 weeks of disasters. And one of the best examples of that can be seen in their defense of Donald Trump deciding that we're just going to do away with the courts. We're going to do away with all of these institutions and all these things that Fox claimed they cared so much about. Now all that's out the window, and that sentiment was called out and really just smacked down by Congressman Ro Khanna, who had an interview with Maria Bartiromo in which she tried to compare President Biden getting through student loan relief to Donald Trump abandoning and disregarding the judicial system at large. And Ro Khanna shut that down, and we were going to have him on the show in just a bit to talk about it. But before we get into that all, and Maria Bartiromo being shut down, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now let's get into this interview, and then we'll talk to Congressman Ro Khanna.
And I agree, Congress's role is critical. But, you know, as far as I can tell, every congressman or congresswoman I ask about all of these crazy ideas to send money, they had no idea it was happening. So how is that possible? You're an elected official. You have no idea that all this the sex change operation money was going to Guatemala? You know, and then if you want to talk about the Supreme Court, I mean, you know, the Supreme Court told Joe Biden that it was unconstitutional to forgive student loan debt. What did that do? He blew it off.
And he complied. He complied.
I don't think he
No,
complied. He kept
with the
forgiving
Supreme
student
Court.
loan debt.
No, he complied 100% with the Supreme Court's decision. He tried to find other ways to make it constitutional, but he complied with that decision. But the point is, Maria, I initially had said that I want to work with DOJ. I got criticism from my own party when I said that, because I expected what Musk would do is go through different federal agencies, go through the Pentagon, look at where the waste was. Of course, 435 members of Congress can't do the entire oversight, and it was important to look for wasteful spending, but you can't then make a unilateral decision, especially when you had real fear in this country when the portal on Medicaid funding was closed for a few hours. Now, I acknowledge that has been resumed, but that really spooked people. Yeah. And when you have issues like cancer funding research being on the table. And so I actually think it would be in Musk's advantage to come to Congress for two reasons. One, it would be lasting change beyond one president. And two, he would get the buy-in of the American public and put to rest some of the fear out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
Well, Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you so much for joining me. There's a couple of things that I want to get into from that interview that we just saw with you and Maria Bartiromo, who was a little bit frazzled, it seemed, by some of your answers. And of course, the defense of her kind of disingenuous claim that Biden trying to get student loan relief through is the same as Donald Trump defying the judicial branch at large. But where I wanted to start is your call for Elon Musk to come before Congress. He is obviously a little bit maybe shaky and squeamish on that point. But if he were to change his mind and was to come before Congress, what would you want to be asking him?
Look, I always thought the point was to come to Congress. I had said when Elon and Vivek were appointed that I'd be open to engaging constructively. And Vivek had called me and said, can you assemble a group in Congress to meet with us? So I don't understand why he wouldn't want to come before the committee. Of course, we need to subpoena him if he doesn't, but he should basically show the transparency of where he's finding these wasteful programs and make it clear that it's for Congress to decide when we have line items on the budget, whether to vote it up or down. And he should answer any questions about financial conflicts and have disclosure. I mean, that is democracy. He has spooked the country because he hasn't been willing to come to Congress, and people see that he's just trying to stop these payments unilaterally.
Yeah, and you would think that someone tweeting, 1,900 times a day at this point about all he's doing and all he's so proud of, he might want to come before Congress and share that. But it seems like when you push back against Elon, or when we saw you push back against JD Vance, these guys aren't super happy to be defending the things that they're espousing all the time. And it really makes me think about this point that you tried to make early on about the possibility of Democrats being able to maybe work with Doge and what that looks like now? But before we get into that, I just want to read a short snippet from a piece that you wrote in the New York Times just yesterday. We have to acknowledge what we spectacularly failed to recognize in the last election, that the status quo is broken and Americans are feeling a righteous anger about the real damage that the governing class has done to their lives over the past few decades. With the establishment of both parties defeated, we are, as you may have heard, at a fork in the road. Either the country will continue to succumb to a burn-it-all-down political nihilism and disillusionment, or Democrats can use this moment of crisis to reframe the terms of the debate. We must persuade people that transformative government is capable of improving their lives by reversing what many have experienced as decades of stagnation and decline. So you're writing about, and I think you hit the nail on the head, this righteous anger that we feel towards the ways that the government has failed us. And Elon is certainly harnessing that, but I feel like he's co-opting the desire to want to see real and really rapid change by pushing this false narrative about Doge. At first, it was about, government efficiency and supposedly trimming the fat, but now it just looks like it's about going after the agencies that have interfered with the actions of his businesses. And of course, Trump wants to pretend that he's about saving money because he's about to pass a historic tax cut for billionaires. If we continue to work or try to work with Doge and offer up good faith arguments about the potential work that they could do, are we hurting ourselves in the message against the corrupt and kind of criminal practices that are taking place there?
Well, first of all, the anger is because people don't have health care. They don't have, can't afford education. They can't afford their credit card bills. And what we need is to have a government working to provide people with childcare, healthcare, helping with education, creating with the private sector new manufacturing jobs and high-paying jobs in communities. Unfortunately, Trump is just the opposite. He's using this anger to say, look, the government has been co-opted, which it has by too many rich people, and so we're just going to dismantle it, but it's not going to help people's lives. Now, I think we should have tried to steer the debate of where the wasteful spending was. It's in the Pentagon. It is with Medicare Advantage fraud. It is with pharmaceuticals fleecing the federal government. But at this point, there can be no cooperation while there's unconstitutionality. So we can't say, oh, okay, this is a good idea to cut wasteful spending, but we're going to turn a blind eye to the unconstitutionality of the exercise. And we have to do everything we can to oppose this until there is an ironclad agreement that the administration will spend what Congress authorizes.
Yeah, and we talked about this on Inauguration Day before we knew what Doge was really going to look like. And yeah, it's clear Elon is not doing anything that he promised. It's difficult. I guess we just shouldn't trust his word at this point. But you and your colleagues, and you wrote about in the piece, trying to come, to consensus in a bipartisan way. You talked about Senator Marco Rubio as well. Do you think that there's any value in trying to talk with Republicans about getting rid of the real waste that is in government at this point? Or should we kind of just use Doge and point to it as the lie that Republicans are telling about what's wrong with government and that they are the ones who are acting in corrupt ways? We see waste coming out of Republican spending, the agenda that they're pushing forward. Or is there still a possibility down the line that we can actually work on this issue?
But right now we have to just expose this for the power grab that it is, unconstitutional and offensive to so many Americans, that a number of billionaires are making decisions unilaterally about stopping benefits that are helping real people, working class folks in neighborhoods that need money for schools, cancer funding research, funding that is going towards kids with special needs. So we need to be not collaborating on that. But I think what we need to also do simultaneously, which my New York Times piece was about, is laying out our vision for the nation. and acknowledging that there are places of wasteful spending, and here are places of having investment to turn around the country. And there, if we can show that there are these ideas can be bipartisan or can have a broad coalition, it makes it more believable to Americans that our positive agenda could be unified. So having examples of bipartisanship for our positive agenda is very different than collaborating with an unconstitutional administration right now.
I completely agree. And I think with all that you've talked about in terms of cutting government waste, specifically in the military, I think that Elon can be a real foil right now. But a different place where we see not only the corruption, but a bit of incompetence, or I guess we're projecting it out soon to be, is this talk of Republicans potentially causing a government shutdown. Now, I've been pretty annoyed with the mainstream media's coverage of this because they will ask you or your Democratic colleagues, are you going to allow a government shutdown to happen like it's Democrats who are in the majority? If that happens, it's going to be because Republicans were unable to bring their coalition and their caucus together to pass a government spending bill. But if that does in fact happen, how do you plan on messaging their incompetence in a way that lands more so than it did this last election cycle? Because the last Congress wasn't great and wasn't productive, but clearly we couldn't get that message across.
Well, the reason we couldn't is because people tend to blame the president. And of course, we had President Biden who did well, but there was inflation and we were unable to convince people we would do better for them. But now the Republicans control both chambers. They control the presidency. They can make it work in terms of getting a budget passed. The reason they're having trouble is because half their base wants to cut Medicaid. I was on with Byron Donaldson tonight with Chris Cuomo. He basically said, I want to cut Medicaid funding. I want to cut mandatory spending. That's Social Security. That's Medicaid. That's Medicare. And Trump knows that those are politically unpalatable. And so they need to get their act together and make sure that they pass something. And Democrats cannot, in good conscience, give votes to budgets that are going to make those kind of drastic cuts.
No, I completely agree. And we need to be talking about the direct communities and constituents that's going to be affected. I'm so glad that we saw, after what I thought was kind of a weak showing from our party in the first few days of the Trump administration, a great deal of pushback. And we saw, sure, lots of protest outside of the actual agencies Trump and Elon was going after. But I feel like we need to be a lot more community oriented and talking about the very specific examples as you have of who's being affected by what's happening right now. Because as we always talk about this messaging war, sometimes I think that we forget about it's not just about messaging. It's also about attention. We can say all the right things to the wrong people who are already on our side, and it doesn't go that far. And that's why I'm so happy that you've gone on. Of course, you're on Fox a lot more than most Democrats, but you've gone on like a Tim Pool or a PBD podcast. These are right-wing influencers who you are reaching an audience that Democrats traditionally don't, to help us win this messaging war. How are you encouraging your colleagues to do the same? Because although I love your voice out there, we need all of our voices going to these places more.
I couldn't agree more, and we need to do it so to show we're not afraid of our ideas, willing to debate, willing to mix it up, willing to stand up for our values. They often put a clip on David Rubin on me defending trans rights, so it's not like I go there and compromise my values, but I try to say it in a way that is reasonable and that shows people that we have courage of our convictions. I'm encouraging a lot of our members to go do that because that's how we start to rebuild trust among people we've lost, and how we show that we're strong as a party. We also need to make sure we're talking to real people, telling their stories. It's not that effective having members of Congress outside these agencies. It's fine, but what's much more effective is having real people say, "Here's what's happening to my family because I don't have Medicaid in the same way anymore. Here's what's happening to my family because of this Department of Education funding cut."
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We need to be telling real stories in places in which people are bumping into their politics. As I always say, they're not reaching it out. That's the voter that we need to be focusing on. It's a lot less to me about the right versus the left as much as it's, who's paying attention or who's getting news or who's seeing news anytime. We need to make sure that we're reaching those people. You're certainly doing so. I always appreciate you coming on. Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for your voice. It's been so important at this time. And You're an inspiration to many young people around the country and to Democrats.
I appreciate that.